Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive with me. Today, we're going to be heading to the Amazon rainforest.
Ooh,
Not literally, of course, but we're
No.
going to be exploring an article from Investor
okay.
called Protecting the Amazon and Indigenous Rights, a Call for Urgent Action.
Interesting.
This piece, it really does paint a powerful picture of what's happening down there, and I'm really eager to kind of unpack it all with you today.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice, I think. What makes this article stand out is that it really focuses on the people, at the heart of the issue. It goes
Yeah.
beyond just the environmental impact and really shines a light on those indigenous communities who, depend on the rainforest for their survival.
Absolutely, and it starts by reminding us that the Amazon is so much more than just trees.
Right.
It's this incredible complex ecosystem that plays just a vital role in the health of our planet.
Yeah.
I mean, it generates 20% of the world's oxygen.
Wow.
So its impact is literally in the air we breathe. But as the article highlights, it's also the ancestral home of so many indigenous communities,
Right.
like the Yanomami people.
Yeah.
And they rely on the rainforest for everything.
Yeah, and these communities aren't just facing, some abstract threat out there.
Yeah.
This article, it brings the situation into really sharp focus by detailing the devastating impact of illegal gold mining. And we're talking about mercury, which is used in that mining process, is just poisoning the environment,
Yeah.
the water, the people.
It's really scary. And there was a statistic in this article that really hit me hard.
Okay.
30 Yanomami children died in a single month due to contamination-linked diseases.
Oh my gosh.
That's just tragic.
Yeah.
It just really underscores the human cost of this crisis.
And the thing about mercury poisoning is that it's not, it doesn't just stop there.
Right.
It accumulates up the food chain.
Oh, wow.
It's poisoning the fish and the animals. And ultimately, it impacts anyone else who comes from that region.
Yeah, it's like this ripple effect of devastation.
Exactly.
But it's not just the mercury, right? The article also calls out deforestation as a major issue.
Absolutely. You're right. Agriculture and cattle farming are wiping out vast, vast areas of the rainforest to make way for, their crops and grazing land.
Yeah.
And sadly, the demand for these products, particularly beef and soy, is a major, major driver of this destruction.
So we're talking about a global issue with far-reaching consequences.
Exactly.
What really struck me was how the article connects deforestation to the climate crisis, which affects us all.
Absolutely.
Trees
Trees act as these carbon sinks, right?
Right.
Absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
When they're cut down, all that stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere,
Oh, wow.
which accelerates global warming.
Wow.
It's this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The more we disrupt the climate,
Yeah.
the more vulnerable the rainforest becomes to things like droughts and fires.
The article paints a pretty dire picture, but it also highlights the resilience and courage of the indigenous people.
Oh, for sure.
And it mentions that indigenous leaders are putting their lives on the line
Right, right.
to speak out against these threats.
Absolutely. They are facing down incredibly powerful forces,
Yeah.
often with limited resources and support.
And there's this powerful quote in here from the article
Okay.
that I think really captures their perspective. And it says, the Amazon is their source of life and health,
Wow.
not just an ecosystem.
Right.
And it really highlights the deep connection
Yeah.
that these communities have with the rainforest.
Absolutely. It's not just survival for them.
Yeah.
It's about protecting their whole way of life,
Mm-hmm.
their culture,
Yeah.
their identity.
And that way of life is being directly threatened. This article points to the escalating violence
Yes.
between illegal miners and indigenous tribes.
It's leading to deaths,
Mhm.
displacement.
Yeah.
These communities are being forced off their ancestral lands, their homes, their sources of sustenance.
It's just heartbreaking to read about these clashes, and it just makes me wonder if enough is being done to protect these communities.
Yeah.
I mean, the article explicitly calls out the Brazilian government,
Yeah.
saying they're failing to take adequate action to stop these illegal activities.
Yeah, you've hit on a key point.
Mhm.
There's just a lack of law enforcement in these remote regions
Right.
and allows these illegal miners to operate with impunity. And it raises the question, who is responsible for protecting these communities and their land?
Right.
And this article seems to suggest that the responsibility extends beyond Brazil's borders.
That's a fascinating point.
Yeah.
It implies that we all have a stake in ensuring the Amazon's protection,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps through international pressure or holding corporations accountable
Mm-hmm.
for their role in deforestation.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into the potential solutions, I'm curious to know more about these indigenous communities themselves.
Okay.
The article mentions their unique relationship with the rainforest.
Right.
But could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? What role do they play in its health and preservation?
That's a great question. And it leads us into, I think, a crucial aspect of this whole issue.
Okay.
Indigenous communities aren't just victims in this story.
Right?
They're active participants
Yeah.
in the fight to protect the Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
They have centuries of traditional knowledge about the rainforest's intricate ecosystems.
Yeah.
And they've developed these sustainable practices that have helped preserve its biodiversity for generations.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right to point out that indigenous communities are really key players in this.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just passive observers.
Right.
They're at the forefront of protecting the Amazon. Their traditional knowledge and
Mhm.
practices are just vital to the rainforest's health.
That makes a lot of sense. They've lived in harmony with the rainforest for centuries.
Right.
So they must have this deep understanding of how to maintain its delicate balance.
Yeah.
Could you give us some examples of those traditional practices?
Absolutely. For example, many indigenous communities practice what's called agroforestry,
Okay.
which is a system of integrating crops and trees.
Interesting.
This helps prevent soil erosion,
Okay.
promotes
Yep.
biodiversity,
Mm.
creates a more sustainable form of agriculture compared to large-scale monoculture farming.
So they're not opposed to agriculture.
Yeah.
They just have a different, more sustainable approach.
Exactly.
What else can we learn from their traditional knowledge?
Well, their understanding of medicinal plants is incredible.
Really?
They've developed these sophisticated systems of using rainforest plants for healing,
Wow.
which have the potential to benefit not just their communities,
Right.
but the world. But there's a dark side to this as well.
Okay.
Biopiracy is a real threat,
Oh, right.
with corporations trying to patent and profit from indigenous knowledge without fair compensation or recognition.
That's a troubling thought that their knowledge is being exploited for profit. It seems like respecting indigenous land rights is crucial, not just for their well-being,
Mm-hmm.
but for the health of the rainforest itself.
Precisely. Indigenous communities often have lower deforestation rates and higher biodiversity than protected areas managed by governments.
Wow.
So empowering these communities to protect their territories is one of the most effective ways
Okay.
to combat deforestation and safeguard the Amazon.
The article talks about this call to action, urging us to do something.
Right.
It can feel overwhelming, though. Like, where do we even start?
Yeah, it's true. The scale of the problem can make you feel powerless,
Right.
but individual actions really do matter.
Okay.
You know, it starts with awareness,
Mm.
understanding the connections between our choices and the impact they have on the Amazon.
Like being mindful of the products that we buy
Exactly.
and where they come from.
Yeah, for instance, choosing sustainably sourced wood,
Okay.
reducing our consumption of beef,
Right.
being aware of where our soy products originate.
These choices might seem small, but collectively they send a message to the market.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
The article also mentioned holding the Brazilian government accountable.
Mm.
What does that look like in a practical sense?
Right.
Is it about international pressure sanctions, even legal action?
It could be all of the above.
Okay.
You know, there are these international agreements and treaties focused on protecting rainforests.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a growing movement to hold governments responsible for environmental damage.
Right.
So supporting organizations that are working to enforce these agreements
Okay.
and advocating for stronger environmental policies
Yeah,
can have an impact.
that makes sense. But sometimes these international efforts seem so slow-moving and bureaucratic. Are there faster ways to apply pressure?
Well, consumer boycotts and campaigns targeting corporations
Okay.
involved in deforestation or illegal activities can create more immediate pressure.
Gotcha.
These companies are very sensitive to public perception
Mm-hmm.
and can be swayed by consumer action. So there's a role for individual action, but also a need for this systemic change.
Yes,
Are there any promising developments on that front?
there are.
Okay,
Technology is playing an increasing role in monitoring deforestation.
interesting.
Satellite imagery and artificial intelligence are becoming more sophisticated at detecting illegal logging and mining in real time,
Wow,
which can help with enforcement.
that's encouraging.
Yeah.
It feels like we're talking about this multifaceted approach here.
Mm-hmm.
Individual action,
Right.
corporate accountability,
Yeah.
government policies,
Absolutely.
and technological solutions.
Mhm.
Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
It requires effort on all fronts.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that we recognize the urgency of the situation and start taking action in whatever way we can.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of this problem.
Right.
The Amazon just feels so far away.
It's true, the rainforest can feel distant, but the impact of its destruction is global. Think about the climate crisis,
Yeah.
the loss of biodiversity, and the potential for future pandemics.
Right.
The Amazon's health is intimately connected to our own.
And I'm thinking back to that quote from the article.
Okay.
The Amazon is their source of life and health. It reminds us that this isn't just about saving trees.
Right.
It's about protecting the lives and livelihoods of people who depend on the rainforest.
And recognizing that vital role of indigenous communities,
Yeah.
their knowledge, their resilience, their deep connection to the land,
Yeah.
they're all essential pieces of this puzzle.
Right.
Supporting their efforts to protect their territories and their way of life is crucial.
We've talked a lot about the challenges and the potential solutions,
We have.
but the article also delves into the personal stories of people affected by this crisis, particularly the Yanomami.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can share some of those stories with us.
I'd be glad to. One story that really resonated with me was about a Yanomami elder.
Okay. Who recounted the changes he had witnessed in his lifetime.
Wow.
He spoke of the once abundant fish stocks that have dwindled due to mercury poisoning,
Right.
the sacred lands that have been desecrated by mining,
Oh, wow.
and the fear that his community will lose their traditions and way of life.
Wow. That's a powerful image, seeing those changes through his eyes.
Right.
It really brings home the human cost of this crisis.
Yeah, and his story isn't unique.
Right.
Many indigenous communities are facing these similar challenges, whether it's displacement due to deforestation or violence from illegal miners,
Yeah.
or the loss of their traditional way of life.
The article talks about the need to amplify their voices and support their fight for self-determination. What does that look like in practice?
It starts with listening to and respecting their perspectives.
Yeah.
Indigenous communities have been stewards of these lands for centuries,
Right.
and their knowledge is invaluable. So supporting organizations that work directly with these communities.
Yeah, advocating for their land rights,
Right.
amplifying their voices in the media,
Yeah.
those are all really important steps.
This article also delves into the economic forces driving finding the system. And I'm thinking about the gold in our electronics,
Yeah.
beef in our burgers, the leather in our shoes.
Exactly. Global demand for these products fuels the industries that are destroying the Amazon.
Right.
We can't ignore that connection.
So are we all ethically compromised just by participating in the global economy then?
Well, it's not about blame,
Okay.
but rather awareness and conscious decision-making. The article isn't suggesting we all become, off-the-grid hermits.
Right.
But it is encouraging us to be more mindful consumers.
Yeah, what does that look like?
Right.
It's hard enough trying to keep up with our busy lives.
Well, it can be as simple as researching the brands that we support,
Okay.
looking for certifications that guarantee ethical sourcing, choosing products that minimize environmental impact.
Right.
Every little bit helps.
The article also calls for these stronger policies to protect the Amazon.
Right.
Is that where real change needs to happen?
Policies are essential. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need regulations that prevent illegal activities, protect indigenous land rights,
Right.
incentivize sustainable practices.
Okay.
But enacting and enforcing effective policies require public pressure and political will.
So it's a cycle then.
Mm-hmm.
Informed consumers can influence businesses who can then lobby governments for better policies,
Yeah.
which hopefully leads to a more sustainable system.
Exactly. It's a long game.
Yeah.
And it requires effort on all sides,
Right.
individuals,
Yeah.
corporations, and governments. But the potential payoff is huge.
Yeah.
Protecting one of the most vital ecosystems on our planet.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the depths of the rainforest to the complex web of global economics.
Right.
It's been eye-opening.
It really has.
This article has really highlighted the interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah.
What happens in the Amazon affects us all. And the choices we make here, even seemingly small ones,
Right.
can have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
This article ends on a powerful message
Okay.
that indigenous people are fighting for all of us.
Yeah.
They're protecting the Amazon, which helps regulate the global climate,
Mm,
preserve biodiversity,
right.
and ultimately impacts the health of our planet.
Right. It's a call to action.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play, whether it's through our consumer choices,
Right.
supporting organizations working on the ground, or advocating for policy changes.
Yeah.
We can all contribute to protecting this incredible place.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this question.
Mm-hmm.
What role will you choose to play in this story?
Mm-hmm.
Will you be a passive observer or an active participant in creating a more sustainable and just future for the Amazon and for all of us?
That's a good question.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring.